Good afternoon and welcome to the Pennsylvania Bar Association Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee's second Lunch and Learn. Today's Lunch and Learn is titled How to Open Your Own ADR Practice. I'm Mary Kate Coleman, Chair of the PBA ADR Committee and an attorney, mediator, and arbitrator with the law firm of Riley, Hewitt, Woody, and Romano in Pittsburgh. Our speakers are Cheryl Cutrona of Cutrona Resolutionary Services of Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania, and David Fitzsimons of ADR Fitz, LLC of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Both Cheryl and David are longtime experienced ADR practitioners who recently went out on their own and started their own ADR practices. They are here today to share their wisdom on what you need to consider when deciding whether to go out on your own and what you need to do to start your own successful practice as a neutral. We ask that you hold your questions until the end. You may also put them in the chat box. Additionally, be aware that we are recording this session so others who are not able to be present today are able to view it at a later date. I'd like to start off by asking Cheryl and David to tell us a little bit about what they did before they went out on their own, why they decided to go out on their own, and what type of ADR work they did previously and are doing now. Cheryl and David?
David, you want to go? Oh, I see you turned off your mic. I guess you want me to start. Well, most of you know me. I'm Cheryl Cutrona, and I'm the former executive director of a community mediation center. The only reason I started my ADR practice was that I'd always been doing things on the side while I was an executive director, but I wanted to retire and I knew I needed to supplement my income. I probably would have been all right, but I kept thinking now that I'm a single income, I really need to make sure I have enough cushion to live the way I wanted to live. So I started it out. I think I have 35 years as a mediator. I dabbled in labor arbitration before that. And I've written articles. I was on the editorial committee of the Conflict Resolution Quarterly for many years. I just decided to resign from there too. So I started out basically to supplement my retirement income. And I had no idea that I was going to be as busy, if not busier now, than I was when I was working as an executive director. So that's where I am now. David, do you want to talk about your background?
Sure, thanks, Cheryl. I graduated from law school in 1984, started my legal career with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, first with a legislative committee and very quickly moving into the Office of General Services, where I got involved in a number of things I never would have thought of in law school. And I think that's probably familiar with a lot of us with legal careers, is things come up as you move along. And I got involved in construction litigation for the Commonwealth. And then when I moved into private practice, I worked with two different law firms, 17 years each. That wasn't planned. It seemed to just happen with that synchronicity. But I was a commercial litigator, construction, probate disputes, commercial contract disputes. And here in Central PA, starting with construction, any of you who are familiar with the AIA contracts for complex construction, mediation is usually a prerequisite to the next level of dispute resolution. So I was familiar with mediation as a mechanism early in my career. And in central Pennsylvania, there was a real dearth of qualified mediators. And whenever colleagues and I would reach out to what were then the leading organizations managing mediation, we were told we were too young and inexperienced to be trusted as mediators or arbitrators. And so we did what most lawyers do. We got a chip on our shoulders and went out and took some training. And some of it took for me. And frankly, becoming a mediator, I think becoming involved in mediation process and understanding some of the things beyond what's in the pin site about what this case is about, I think probably helped me evolve in my practice as an attorney. It certainly got me canned by a couple of my angrier clients back in those days. And then I got on the Middle District panel of certified mediators after I'd had sufficient training. And I've mediated construction cases, fire cases, employment discrimination, pretty much everything in the civil litigated area of things. And then with the guidance of a couple of professors from my alma mater, the Dickinson School of Law here in Carlisle, I started going out and getting training outside of bar association specifically sponsored training programs. That's where I went and learned some things from Cheryl Cutrona at one point. If I read a really good book by somebody on mediation and I found out they were teaching a course, I went and took it. So I'm probably a little too immersed in the thought of process at some point rather than the practicalities of trying to make a living. But that all kind of came together over the last 5 years. The handout I've got is headed succession planning. About 5 years ago, I was asked onto a PBI panel on succession planning for lawyers. And I've been an active member of the Legal Ethics Committee for the PBA for a few years. And 5 years ago, some of the now existent changes in the rules of professional conduct, providing some flexibility for lawyers to plan succession, to try to exit the practice of law, if you will, or the firm structure to do other things, have become available. And that kind of opened my eyes, frankly, to taking a hard look at, it's one thing to learn to sit as a mediator with other people's conflicts. One of the things that comes up in all the succession planning is having that conversation with yourself and self-reflection as you're looking at where am I and where am I going, and getting ready for those seminars led me to spend some more time, if you will, learning a little bit more and having that conversation with myself. And that's what led me, timing being everything, of course. Last September, in our third lockdown, is when I left my firm and started my practice from what you see here, what I call my panic room in the basement, what my wife and children call the former playroom, but which I should tell you is my office. One thing, when you close your office, you do not have enough wall space for all the plaques you've collected. So there's a couple on the wall in here, and there's a couple of stacks behind me that a cat is currently sorting through. So yeah, I'm not nearly as stressed as I was last September. I hope that's a good beginning.
That's a good start. Perhaps both you could tell me, like, what type of more specifically maybe what type of ADR work you did before you went out on your own, and then what type of ADR work you're doing now as well. It might be interesting to the audience.
Well, I think one of the things that I thought was going to be my benefit to me is the fact that I've never been an advocate. I've never represented anyone at the bar of the court. I've always been a neutral. And so there's the good part about that is you don't have to worry as much about conflicts of interest. But the bad part about that is you don't get those referrals from former colleagues who are representing clients who could benefit from mediation. If they knew me, they might send me some cases. But I do think that having 35 years as a mediator in a variety of fields, I mean, in community mediation, you can pretty much do anything. And I kind of found my niche in special education and family law. And so even now that I'm retired, that seems to be my area of expertise. But I've been doing a lot more, even during this pandemic, I've been doing a lot of university-based departmental disputes. I do multi-party, a lot of multi-party with a tinge of restorative practices involved, because usually those involve something, horrific that happened to somebody at least. And I find that my expertise in restorative practices has really informed my practice as a mediator, particularly in infidelity disputes when I'm doing family cases, and in disputes at the university level where someone feels like they've been passed by or scapegoated or bullied or whatever. Though all of those RJ practices are very, very helpful to have. I think one of the best things about starting an ADR practice is you have to really look carefully at what your licenses and certifications are in. I was a late bloomer. I did not graduate from law school till I was 50, and just decided to stay at where I was. And since then, I've done pretty much every kind of mediation imaginable, and that was very helpful in setting up the practice. But also, I dug deep into my previous background, and I'm doing arbitration now too. I think the most helpful person, I talked to a bunch of people before I set up my ADR practice, particularly in terms of, should I be a sole proprietor? Should I do an LLC? Should I be a nonprofit and do as woman-owned business so that I can get grants and things like that to start out? Because I thought that being a nonprofit would help me with training and consulting, that kind of thing. So I really thought a lot about it and decided, you know what, I'm not going to go full-fledged into this. I'm going to be a sole proprietor. I'm going to work out of my house. It's the easiest thing, the least amount of investment that you need to have. But because I spoke with Judy Meyer, she says, don't limit yourself to mediation. So, over the years, I've been working with Trish Jones. So I have conflict coaching in my background. I have mediation. I have arbitration. I've been for 32, I think, years. I was a special education mediator. So now I'm a hearing officer for the Department of Education, doing special education disputes on a contract basis, which is nice because it's not full-time. I can still add other things. So I've, looking into my background and speaking with other people has really helped me sort of fashion an ADR practice that works for me at this level as a retired person. If I was going to do this full time and not have been retired, I'm not sure I would have been as likely to jump in head first. But because I have that Social Security cushion behind me, I figured, now's the time. If I'm ever going to do it, just jump. And it's been pretty good. I think one thing you need to consider if you're going to work out of your house or if you're going to be a sole practitioner starting an ADR practice, and this is something I learned when I was an independent consultant a number of years ago, you have to be able to close the door. If you're a workaholic and you're working on your own, if you're busy, you still have to sleep, you still have to have a life. And this year I know having a life is different than it used to be in terms of having a life. But I think that I know when I get stressed or I'm writing a big decision or I'm worried about a case that's coming up, I have a tough time closing that door at night and just turning it off and going to sleep. So as you consider going into solo practice, think about yourself. Are you going to be able to do that? What boundaries are you going to have so that that business that's now all yours and all by yourself, if that's the way you're going to do it, how are you going to turn it off at night and still have a life? And some days are busy, some weeks are busier than others, some months are busier than others. But if you yourself aren't ready to be able to, if you're a workaholic in your regular life, you might be a workaholic in this life, and it's tougher to turn it off. And just like I always say, I have to be able to close my office door at night and still live. So those are some of the things that I thought about when I started out. And like I said, talking to Judith Myers was probably the best thing I ever did. She was so enormously helpful in helping me figure out what I needed to do. It's probably because of her years of ADR experience. She knew what questions to ask and how to guide me. But find someone like that you trust who can help you figure out, answer the questions that you need to answer before you decide to jump into this sort of thing. David, I'm sorry I talked too much. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that was very interesting, Cheryl. It's interesting to hear what you've been doing in the pandemic and how you reached inside yourself and got sort of back into the arbitration work again from many years ago. So thank you. So David, maybe if you could just, I'm not sure if if I missed this, I'm sorry, but can you tell us what type of cases you're working on now, especially during the pandemic?
Yes, and Cheryl, thank you. I do have two things I make notes of right here that I do want to remember to get to, that Cheryl touched upon. One is gatekeepers, how you get work, and the other one is work-life balance, which I think is very important. I say this as a cat wanders around behind me and threatens to work on cables while I'm talking. But the types of cases I've been mediating, when I was appointed to the Middle District panel of mediators in 2002, I checked way more boxes than was probably prudent at the time, because certainly in 2002 in Pennsylvania, the ability to obtain training, that to me was very important, training in what is a new process that requires a lot of, I believe, application of skill sets that don't necessarily come directly from law school education and practice after that education, particularly when, I say I was in law school in the early 1980s, and there was a forward-thinking professor who had a course on mediation, but only the leftover hippies from the 70s signed up for his seminar. That was in the viewpoint of the rest of us who are going to be world-beating litigators and all that silly stuff. See, I've been having that conversation with myself, and I don't always come out looking good in it, but that's okay. But so I was in a general practice with a 31 lawyer firm doing all the litigation I could do with construction and probate disputes, and I do residential construction, commercial construction, probates, once again, some insurance defense practice. I had some personal injury plaintiff work. So I had, that scattering of substantive knowledge that anybody in a general practice with a reasonably sized firm in its community is going to learn. And that brings me to gatekeepers. In Pennsylvania, most often your referrals to work as a neutral come from attorneys who have cases and they're looking for a neutral. And attorneys looking for neutrals tend to really, really focus on substantive expertise. Expertise being the phrase, even though that's still frowned upon from an RPC standpoint. And that sometimes is a misnomer, because a lot of it, I think, comes also from many attorneys who, quote, understand mediation and the need for a mediator, really know nothing about mediation and understand nothing about what opportunities mediation can provide. And they have a tendency when looking for mediators to ring fence themselves and their clients by limiting something to, you need some expertise if you're looking for a neutral case evaluation. But I've also seen mediations where a neutral is selected who's very well qualified in the area of law, but not qualified in the process of being a neutral and helping people move towards the thought processes and the analyses that for some reason they've been unable to do after 3 years of litigation, and so forth. And even now I'm getting more referrals from colleagues who are starting to learn that I'm out on my own, who have cases that have not yet been filed. And they're looking to sit down with a mediator before filing suit, which I think for Pennsylvania is a really great development, because just 5 years ago, we were debating when's the right time to go to mediation, before or after the pretrial conference. And now I've got attorneys that I've conducted mediations with reaching out long before that time process, because I think those of us, and I know a lot of people on this call are very experienced mediators. Sometimes when a case is far down the road and they're ready to mediate, the first 3/4 of the mediation process has to do with unraveling the knots that have been tied since people hired counsel, not through fault of the counsel, but through the way things go. And Cheryl, on work-life balance, I absolutely agree with Cheryl on that. And actually, I think, again, getting back to the succession planning side of things, a lot of the, I think, criticisms of the legal profession and those of us who have a few years experience in the legal profession and our alleged inability to step away, more comes from a, to me, for most of my colleagues, the practice of law as a profession kind of takes over your life and can be all encompassing. And I've had some background with the ethics committee and with the discipline, being on the disciplinary board, I should emphasize. And a lot of times, we hear a lot of this talk these days about work-life balance. And it's not just a question of, are you in the office and can you be seen? COVID has kind of helped that conversation move along. Many of us have been able to practice law without being seen in the office because the office is closed. But to me, the thing that Cheryl mentioned about when you're not working, are you truly not working? And I know I spent a good 10, 15 years in my practice where all of my dreams, those that I could remember, were about cases. Sometimes for a good reason, because there was a deadline coming up. And sometimes there were cases long gone. And I think that it's important, and getting more deeply involved in ADR, mediation practice, taking courses. I took a course one time because I was just tired of role playing. I took a course 6, 7 years ago called Meditation for Mediators. And why is this? And the whole precept of the course was, as a mediator, you sit in a room full of angry people in conflict. And there's a tendency to kind of be a sponge and take all of that on because you're the only person in the room who's being calm and deliberative and helping people move along. Kind of the side about, if you ever talk to a psychologist, all psychologists, clinical psychologists, see a psychologist. And so that was a kind of a breakthrough class for me, simply because all of those, not just those buzz phrases about mindfulness and the practice, it helped me, I like to think, move along a bit and be able to make those separations and understand that and not feel so bad about a Wednesday afternoon not being a lawyer.
Thanks, David. You both talked about, experience, training that you felt you needed before going out on your own, work credentials. You talked about getting advice from other people. Are there any other things you considered before going out on your own?
Well, I took a couple classes in what to do in terms of marketing yourself, because I'm going to just, if you don't mind, just put a share screen on for a second. I think you all got this document ahead of time, but one of the things that I found incredibly helpful was reading the book Becoming a Mediator by Peter Lovingham, and he's updated it several times. But the one thing that he says that I think is so important is that you have to do relentless marketing, and in order to get business, because it's one thing to decide, okay, I'm going to start an ADR practice, but usually the big question is, so how do I get cases? And if you don't have, if you're, you can get on service provider rosters and all those kinds of things. And those are usually fairly limited income sources. You don't make a ton of money doing cases for, the various service providers. They notoriously pay very low compared to, especially if you're coming out of your role as in a law firm. It's not the same kind of money that you're used to. So what I decided was I needed to take a course on how to actually go out there and create something that would be recognizable enough to bring business. And, you have your credibility and like I taught law school. I worked in the same place for a gazillion years. I was on a bunch of service provider rosters. I thought that would give me a good start. But I think I decided from everything that I've learned is you have to treat becoming a solo practitioner in an ADR practice the same way you would start any business. So I decided to put together a business plan and a marketing plan. And there's a good one I found, nerdwallet.com. It's free. I tried to do as much as I could for free because I wasn't sure I was going to be successful and I wanted to do it on the cheap. That's why I'm in a home office. I decided not to rent a space or anything like that. If I have a big case where I'm going to have to bring people in, I look to share space, which is possible. But anyway, I decided to put a business plan together. And one of the things that they told me when you get started is to be sure you don't just do some do-it-yourself, unless you're good at it, website and take your own photos. They said you have to go out and actually get a professional to put these together for you. And I would love for all of you to look at my website because we spent a lot of time on that thing. And I have a lot of nuance in there that I don't know if people pick up on. It makes me happy, but I don't know if anybody else gets the fact that the sun is rising, like the dispute is going away. But, so I put a lot of thought into my website, but I may be the only one that really enjoys it. I got pictures done. Yeah, it was that. I don't know if that really makes that much difference, but I was told that you need to get a professional. Don't just put sloppy pictures that you've taken with your cell phone up there because the resolution isn't good enough and it's going to look cheap. So I put a lot of effort and time into finding a professional and putting a nice, what I feel is a nice website together. I also did a lot of thinking about what do I really have the expertise to do? And so, I made a little list of everything and then decided to correlate that with my website. So it doesn't just look like the only thing that I can do is be a mediator. I tried to not only mention the areas of practice, but also like conflict coaching, multi-party, systems design, all those kinds of things. I made sure that everything that I was saying that I could do, I had the right credentials for. So I went back through and made sure that, everything that I had is current. My professional associations were listed. Because one of the things I found out when I was the ethics co-chair for Association for Conflict Resolution a million years ago, we had a complaint about a mediator who said that she was a member of the Association for Conflict Resolution. And I couldn't find her on the website, but who knows whether or not the websites are really up to date. So I called the membership coordinator at ACR and said, so-and-so says on their website that she's a member of ACR. Do you have her listed? Well, she was never a member of the association, never paid a dues, never did anything like that. So they had no recourse using us because she was not a member. We had no control over her. But there's some people that put all kinds of stuff up there that may or may not be valid. So be sure that you have the backup credentials in case anything ever happens. And you have to show a piece of paper that says, yeah, I am a member. So they say, what do you call it? Membership card carrying person. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everything I did was above board. And I wanted to look at each area of practice to make sure everything was up to date. And I still do go to trainings. I still teach. I still try to get more information because I find that a lot of times you meet people at these courses that can be helpful. Some of my best family law referrals come from former students where I taught at Temple Law School. They're now, shows my age, but they're now all married and getting divorced. And so they call me to mediate because they remember me from law school. So networking, attending meetings, mentoring or shadowing people who have more experience than I do, I think is helpful. Also, trying to see other styles, because, I trained for a lot of years and I'm kind of in my own groove in terms of being a facilitative mediator. But I went out and observed a mediator who is evaluative. And I learned transformative. I'm not as interested in that as I am the other areas, but I tried to broaden my area of expertise so that I could not be in that rut of only doing things the way I've always done them for many years. I wanted to shadow and learn new things. And I was able to do a couple of those things before I actually retired, which was helpful because I had my eyes on the prize before I actually left the business. And I do have business cards, but these days during the pandemic, they're sitting in a box in my drawer. I don't go anywhere to send them to anybody. But somebody also told me you should, it's almost like getting married or graduating from university. Send out invitations, announcements to everybody you know. Keep that Rolodex. Let them know that you're in business for yourself. Put your business cards in there so that they can keep you on the Rolodex. Just those kinds of things. I won't go through all of them, but even, some people, I think David said people really don't know what mediation is. So have your little elevator speech ready. For those of you who belong to the New York listserv, which is probably the best listserv out there, it was started by Maria Volpe during just shortly after 9/11. And it's got like over 7,000 members. So if you want to keep current, everything that's new and happening goes through that website or that listserv. If you're not interested, you can hit delete. But one of the things they were doing was trying to come up with a uniform definition of mediation, which of course is impossible. But for you should have some sort of elevator speech. So if somebody comes up to you and says, "What do you do?" You can very succinctly and comprehensively tell them what you do as an ADR practitioner. There's other things that we all know about. Conflict Resolution Day is a way to publicize. If there's anything going on in your area, big conflicts, and you're an ADR practitioner, watch the newspaper. I don't do as much now as I used to. I send them to other people to do. But if you see something that's happening that could benefit from mediation, or for example, there was a recent thing in Pennsylvania where they had a mediator come in to start talking about reopening the schools with COVID. And the article in the newspaper said the mediator hadn't made a decision yet. Now, because I'm doing those special ed cases, I figured I probably should keep my mouth shut, but I forwarded it to a friend of mine who just started an ADR practice. And I said, look, here's a good opportunity to get your name in the paper about your business. Go in there and write a letter to the editor and, talk about the fact that a lot of people think that mediators are arbitrators and vice versa. So use any opportunity like that to get out there and talk about mediation. Also, if you belong to any kind of professional association, if they're having internal disputes or whatever, you can demonstrate your services by doing everything that you do as a mediator, being an active listener, excuse me, using your skills to help them resolve their disputes. So a lot of people are into blogs and vlogs these days. Not my thing. I don't want to be hooked into having to remember to write an article every other day. But I see a lot of people have those, their own YouTube channel and different things like that. I used to do more with brochures. I don't now that I've started everything privately and I'm home during the pandemic, I haven't been going out and dropping brochures off. But if we get back to whatever was pre-pandemic life, that's another way is to publicize your business. If you're not strictly an attorney, you can get away with doing the types of public relations that you need that are a little bit more in your face than it is when you're an attorney. But also just model those communication skills wherever you go. And I also think that once you have built a successful ADR practice, be sure and pay it forward by either teaching a course or mentoring new mediators. One of the things that I found is student interns, even when we're just online these days, are dying to get experience. So if you're a solo practitioner and you go out and you want to have a student or someone who's, trained to be a mediator but hasn't had experience yet, it's great to have someone coming along, even if you're just online, to type in the agreement or help with scribing if you're the type of mediator that uses a whiteboard or some type of brainstorming list. Have the students do that. It's helpful for you because you don't have to do it all yourself, but it's really great for the young interns or the new interns coming up, so they can have the experience of working with someone who knows what they're doing, and they make great assistants. So I just wanted to run through those things. You can read it more carefully on your own, but I really think that if you're going to be successful, you have to be prepared to do a lot of marketing and not just preaching to the choir. Like, we can do these things as a way to talk about it, but it's like you guys are all going to be, you're all mediators, so you know what you're doing. We need to figure out better ways, all of us as a profession. We need to figure out better ways to market to non-ADR professionals so that they understand better what we do and how we can add value to the work that they do without taking away their business, because I think that was one of the big fears early on. So be prepared to market and be prepared to share. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Cheryl. And that was a fantabulous handout. That was really great. Had lots of good information in it. And I love the suggestion about reading the newspaper and offering services up. When I took my one of my trainings at Harvard, I think it was Roger Fisher who sat down and read the newspaper every day, and he just called people up. He actually got involved in a dispute in a South American country that way, and worked with one of their presidents. So I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you. David, in terms of the nuts and bolts of setting up a practice, do you have any comments on what needs to be done to set up an ADR practice?
Well, I wish I'd had Cheryl's list 7 months ago. I'd probably be further along, but I just want to do a quick screen share for everyone. Let me see if this comes across. Are you seeing that?
Yes,
What are
we
you
see.
seeing there, Mary Kate?
I'm sorry.
What are you seeing there?
A houseboat.
Right, but what's behind it?
Oh, the sunset.
Yeah, see, that's a sunset. That's my logo. And
Ah.
I realize that everybody really should have a sunrise, the new beginning, but I've decided that this is about putting that other stuff behind you. And because I only know that I took this picture at Bowen's Island off the front deck of a bar at sunset, the backstory, I have to find a way to get that into my marketing, but that's differentiation is the word I wrote down when Cheryl was describing things. What you do when you move into a business and the marketing, I absolutely agree with all of it. I am terribly far behind in the aspect of my website is still 6 years old. I've got everything written up, ready to go, and I just haven't done it. And I've been asking myself why this is. And part of it for me has been 34 years in law firms, practicing within a law firm as an associate and then partner and shareholder and all of that. It's not I think a switch you turn off and turn on the new switch right away, or it hasn't been for me. So part of your planning has to be, what am I looking to do and where am I? And don't be as I think we often are as lawyers in a firm, don't be too caught up in being inside the box. And that's maybe a reason why I'm a solo now and I'm doing ADR, is I've never been comfortable with the four walls of a box, even though those provide structure, safety. But there comes a time, I guess, as we evolve, as we grow and age, that we maybe look at little things a little different. I joined MCDR, the Maryland Council of Dispute Resolution, partly from an observation that structurally several of our surrounding states are, let's say, more mature than Pennsylvania in their setup, acknowledgement and recognition of ADR. And since my mother still lives in Annapolis, it's a very convenient location to get some additional training sometimes, and to get some insights from a court-sponsored system that, again, is let's say a little more ahead or different from what we have in Pennsylvania. And the one book that I had that I wanted to make sure I provided people to look at was the So Good They Can't Ignore You book. It's written by a gentleman called Cal Newport. I think he's at Georgetown University now. I read this back in the summer of last year. And what it is, it's a self-help guide for your future career, really written for a much younger audience than me. But the basic tenet of his draft is, look, if you have a dream, if you have a passion, by all means follow your passion, but understand first what career capital you have to base that drive towards your passion. You know, if somebody's 25 years old and they really want to be a mediator, my advice to them is different from somebody 50 years old who's really looking to dial down and do more mediation, because what are you bringing to the mix, I think, is an important part of your self-evaluation and what gatekeepers are looking at when they're looking for a mediator. What Cal Newport writes about is, you know, as you go forward in your career, think about the steps and the directions that your career is taking you in, or you take your career in. Do they fit into the puzzle of the end game that you want to have? And of course, I took that book and reverse engineered it and looked at my resume, if you will. I have an ADR resume, which kind of throws in there everything I've done professionally and bar association wise, looking for potential connection points. And then the second part of that ADR resume is every formal training course I've either taken or taught in mediation and arbitration, so that my idea is that in differentiation, I'm demonstrating to the gatekeepers and, more importantly, their clients, that I'm someone who has invested some time and effort into a process that is different from the litigation process. You know, Cheryl's comments about looking outside that box into a group mediation. I took a transformative course at Hofstra with Professors Baruch Bush and Professor Coffey, one of those 4-day long weekend programs. That was a real eye-opener for me when my initial training as a mediator was based upon facilitative, evaluative models of mediation. I'm not saying I became a transformative mediator, because I know that I know some really, really good transformative mediators. But a couple of professors that I was getting guidance from as I was seeking out courses, you know, made the point that, you know, we have a tendency, oh, what's your philosophy? What's this and that? And frankly, I've used facilitative, evaluative, and transformative and narrative models at times in mediations. So I would say, you know, if you look at your skills, well, I've been doing personal injury work for the last 40 years. Great. You have an extraordinary wealth of experience in that. For instance, if you're an insurance defense counsel, one of the biggest resistance that insurers have to a neutral in a personal injury case is, what did she do before she was a mediator? And if she was a plaintiff's lawyer in the last 10 years, I don't want to hire her. And eventually they realize a properly trained neutral mediator who understands the plaintiff's side can be very useful to the defense in a mediation, and vice versa. An experienced defense lawyer can make credible representations to the defense in a mediated PI case, and also to the plaintiff's side. It's, you know, and that's understanding the process and having the training for the process. And so, you know, I'm basically starting to repeat what Cheryl said, is understand what you're bringing to the table, but don't limit yourself to what you're bringing in, because once you get moving, different opportunities will come up. And I've turned away a few things in the last 3 months. In other words, I've referred them to other people with a specific skill set, because I'm very much invested in the idea that to be an effective neutral with a law degree, it's required me to take a serious look and some serious education outside my law experience to where I think I can be useful. I don't know if that's going to turn out to be right, but it's been important to me as a litigator when I'm selecting a mediator. I've seen mediations fail because if your mediator's only tool is essentially a pre-trial case evaluation of your case, that only takes you so far. There's plenty of mediated disputes where everybody in the dispute knows in their heart of hearts where they have to go, but nobody's going there. Not the lawyers, not the parties, and there's reasons for that. And I think you need more than the ability to run the numbers to help people work with that. And I finally found the stop share button. I apologize. Oh, and I did, one of my technological things was I now have 2 screens. But Cheryl, when I'm talking, I forget about the second screen.
And I wrote the name of the title of the book that you recommended, David, in the chat. So if anybody can get a chance to write it down, it sounds great. I have to.
And I can actually put that up real quick here now. That's Amazon, but go to your local bookseller and ask them to get it in. It's like a $12 book. It's really worth having it just to take a look. And while I'm successfully screen sharing, I think this is an absolute necessary read for anybody. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize in Economics winner, and he's actually a psychologist. And this is about System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 thinking files lawsuits. System 2 thinking gets them resolved. It's a great beach read if we ever get to go to, and especially if you're on the beach by yourself. So that's a book I highly recommend because it gave me more tools to understand my own thought process and to understand conflicting parties' thought process. You know,
Well, thanks for that recommendation. And Cheryl, there's a chat message. Maybe if you could share, if Cheryl could share the link for the New York listserv that you referenced early, sometime before we, if you have it handy, sometime before we sign off. Yeah, so I want to make sure that we have, we're getting close to our hour. I just wanted to, and I wanted to leave some time for questions, but I also wanted to ask Dave and Cheryl, if there's, before I open it up for questions, if there's anything else you'd like to say or advice you'd like to give the audience.
Now, I was just make sure that you get some good marketing material out there that's going, especially social media, website, things like that. And if you're good at it, I understand that LinkedIn allows you to reach more people, but I have never been successful with LinkedIn. So others tell me it is, and that's where I see a lot of the blogs and the vlogs and all that stuff. But I don't know. There's also some people on that I really think that it's a service where they write the articles for you and you send them out on email. I read the first couple. I don't find they're interesting. So if I don't think they're interesting, I don't know if others will either, because I'm easily amused. But find a way to market yourself that works. And it's not easy. I don't know if any of us really have the key to it right now, other than, reaching the people who already know us is easy, but reaching the people who are potential clients who don't know us is more difficult. So if anybody finds out how to do that, do another lunch and learn on it, because we could all benefit from hearing about that. But I'm open for any questions too.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions for Cheryl and David?
One area I think is worth looking into for anybody breaking in, and Cheryl referenced the working with students. I've always wondered, and Cheryl, I don't know how this has ever worked for you, whether co-mediation is a reasonable option for helping expand the network of people who first are into ADR, and assisting each other, in the sense that, if you're open to co-mediation, you've immediately doubled your contacts. And finally, the last thing I would also do is, as far as getting my business plan together, I took that old attorney who represents himself and the fool for a client, and I hired somebody to set up my LLC for me. And I have a thing about LegalZoom, so I hired a lawyer. And I also hired a guy that understands computers, and I've had the experience of running through my own crawl space and running my own Cat5 wire, so that I'm not relying on, so any dumb labor I was able to do myself, but I had somebody who knows where the Cat5 wire has to be plugged in at the end of that. And then administrative assistance is a thing that I'm also working on. And it turns out luckily my wife has a cousin who's a former large law firm paralegal, who's now a solo working as a legal content editor. And she's fabulous. And all she needs for me to do is to get her some copy. And I think it's important, like Cheryl's pointing out, start off with your own copy and then have somebody edit it for you, is the approach that I'm taking. And if anybody on this call is interested in my cousin's services, let me know. I'd be happy to connect you with her. She does fabulous work. Thank you. I'm done.
Does your cat try to open your door with her paws?
Oh,
she was doing that when you're talking about your cat. What? That's so funny. She's great. Does anyone have any questions for Cheryl or David? Feel free to speak up.
I have a comment. Cheryl, I share your view of LinkedIn. And for years, I had a standing challenge. Did anybody know anybody that ever got a job through LinkedIn? And I would say that to people. Well, my wife's present job, she got through LinkedIn.
Wow.
So, and she throws that in my face often. But my view is that it's more of a chat room than an employment opportunity.
I sent out that listserv thing, so if everybody can see it. If you have any trouble with it, in case I typed it in wrong or whatever, just email me. My email address is on that handout that you received, and I'll hook you up. It's probably you get a lot of stuff, but it's all things that you wouldn't find elsewhere. I think it's the best listserv, and it's international too. I think it's got somewhere 6,000 or 7,000 people around the world. So yeah, if you want to get on one listserv for ADR, that's the one.
Good tip. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
One observation I've had is I've never asked a mediator for help and not gotten 5 times as much information as I could have reasonably expected. Culturally, people who are long past the Kool-Aid stage of neutrality and really are committed. You know, that if anybody's read any of the ethics standards for mediators under the various platforms, the forwarding and furtherance of the process is an important part of it. And I know many of you in this call, Sally, I see Sally's here, among others, have been so generous to me with guidance and help in prior years that I've probably been churlish enough to forget to thank you. But really, it is a community of professionals who are committed to good works, and put us all to the test and drop us an email and ask us for guidance, and I think you'll always find, if somebody doesn't have the answer, they'll know 5 people that do.
Here, I thought my penchant for that was because I have a degree in library science, and that's like why I over assist. I didn't know it was because I'm a mediator, but yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. I love to connect, especially these days when it's very limited opportunities available to connect with folks.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll close out our session by, I'm sorry.
One more thing is that David has a special birthday this week. I think we should all recognize.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Lacey.
happy birthday.
Lacey always made a point of sending me a happy birthday email before any of my partners.
Well, that's wonderful. I hope you have a good day.
It was
Good birthday.
Tuesday.
Oh, it was
I
okay.
spent the whole day writing up my speeches for this lunch.
Well, if you're like me, you celebrate for more than a day.
You're right, exactly. It's birthday month.
I have a season. So, well, thank you to David and Cheryl for speaking to us today and sharing their wisdom and experience. And thank you to Susan Wolf from the PBA who ran our Zoom meeting. And thank you everyone for attending. If you have ideas for a future ADR committee lunch and learn, please feel free to contact me, and look forward to seeing you at one of our meetings or somewhere else in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. You've been a great chair.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.